says, well, if I get it, I don't worry about it. So therefore it has to be resistant to that because, hey, I didn't get it, right? Even though I never once had the disease. Well, howdy everybody. Good morning, good morning. This year I've been hyper focused on different varieties and really learning more about them. And I see a couple things going on in the garden that I want to just kind of discuss, because I don't know, is it false advertising or is it just the way it is? Quick before we get started though, look at this watermelon. This is one of those crimson watermelons and it is getting there. So I am super excited about that. Really is nothing better than the sweet, sweet nectar of a fresh watermelon. I mean, come on. But I want to talk about this bed here right behind me. This is where our carrots and our lima beans are. And we're not going to talk about the carrots. Shocker. So the lima beans are supposed to be bush lima beans. And I'm not sure how I feel about this situation. Let me get you down low so you can see what's cooking here. So, I mean, everything is definitely growing. There's no doubt about that. There's just, I don't know. I mean, you look at it and it's like this one, it looks like it could be okay if you see that. But then look over here at this. Like, what's the deal? What's going on here? You're supposed to be a bush lima bean. I don't like the way this is unfolding here. This is getting to be a tragic situation going on, to be honest, because we had specifically designed this for a reason. I mean, if you pick it up and we look down at it, the carrots are in the back, and the idea was that they would grow up and then kind of shade the carrots and protect them for a little while until it's time to put our parsnips in. That's just not the case. That is not what's going on right now. They're vining, and they're vining on the ground. And to be totally honest, it's a terrible situation for multiple reasons. So one, at this rate in the season, I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, the season's almost over or anything like that, because it's not, but it's starting to get pretty daggone close as far as like time to plant stuff and get going again. These have been in the ground, I'd say about 3 weeks. So, you're 3 weeks behind on anything. I'm sitting here weeding while I'm talking. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, what do we do? I'm thinking about staking each individual plant up and seeing if I can't get it to go. Now, I've grown bush green beans before, and generally speaking, they are all about the same, where they will kind of grow. They'll be a bush habitat. Now, I do need to stake them, but every once in a while I get one that tries to vine, but it doesn't. And I mean, depending on these growth stages, like this one looks to be a little farther behind, but this one's super long. This one's super long. This one in the back is even longer. I mean, look at that. You're talking 3+ feet. That's how tall the plant should be at its best. And then this one, well, damn. I just keep finding them longer and longer. So I don't really know what to expect. Like, this one's not doing too bad here. So this one may actually do what it's supposed to do. I don't know. This one here, I think that one was a little behind. This one is super long as well. So my question actually becomes is like, should we even be trying to buy these plants that way, where they kind of trick the normal method that they grow? I mean, I've heard of like bush cucumbers. I've never grown them because I've always heard that notoriously they just kind of grow bigger than they're supposed to and do exactly what those lima beans are doing. Now, I will show you some of the tomatoes that we're doing as well, and it's kind of the same situation. This is one of the geranium kiss dwarf tomatoes. Now, granted, it's an indeterminate tomato. So for an indeterminate, this is 100% dwarf. But dwarf part's not supposed to be necessarily the fruit, right? It was advertised as a dwarf plant, which it is. I mean, it's in a pot, elevated 2 feet high, comes up to my chest. So it's probably about a 2 to 3 foot plant. And again, for an indeterminate tomato, that is definitely a dwarf size. There's no question about it. But when I hear stuff like full-size fruits, and then I look and I see on the plant this, you know what I see? Cherry tomatoes, glorified cherry tomatoes. Now I will say that as far as cherry tomatoes go, even if that, let's just say that that is a cherry tomato, that's a bigger cherry tomato. And I'm cool with growing that, but it was advertised of having like 4 to 8 ounce fruits on it, which clearly we're not getting 4 to 8 ounce fruits. That one's totally filled up, and the one on my porch is starting to have them come in, and the one on the side of the greenhouse is starting to come in. And when you start comparing them all, you clearly can see like, nah, that's not gonna be full-size fruits. Not to mention, before I really knew what was going on, I planted 4 more of them. Now you have to remember, I typically only do 1 cherry tomato plant a year because that's all the cherry tomatoes that we can keep up with. And now if you think about it, I have 7. You know, if I knew that, do you really think that I would have planted these so heavy? Being that I did that, like I read the description and I did it. And I'm not saying it's like false, but I'm not saying that it's true, if that makes any sense. And we got to be real cautious when we buy things. I mean, buyer beware, you know what I mean? For when we do all of these plantings. So when we walk around and we look at these different plants, these different varieties, and when I say varieties, I don't just mean like anything in general, you know, like this is a green bean. Then we have like purple green beans. Like, yeah, they're gonna grow purple green beans and that's fine. But when we start trying to trick the growing habits of the plants, I think we can get into a lot of trouble like that. And it leads to, how should I put this, disappointment on the gardener's stake. Look at our peppers here. So these are different varieties. We've got our, let's see, you can see all these little peppers on here. These are all lipstick peppers. Now they are advertised to be about that size and smaller, noticeably smaller than a bell pepper. Now I would say that that is definitely mission accomplished. Like we knew that that was going to be a smaller bell pepper, and we got a smaller bell pepper. It produces, in my experience, this is my 3rd year growing them, more peppers than a bell pepper. So we're cool with that all the way around. But it's kind of doing what it is, but it didn't say like smaller, compact plant or anything like that. I have grown a couple cabbages. The Copenhagen market cabbage I've been growing for the past couple of years. It's supposed to be a smaller plant, and it definitely is a smaller plant and produces smaller cabbages. So, I mean, there are variations that do work, but for the most part, I'm kind of starting to wonder if I should even dive into this realm of like, oh, I want to be like compact. Let me get a compact plant to try and grow. And instead of doing something like this with these green beans, and just being basically upset about it, or not green beans, lima beans, and being upset about it, why don't I just get a regular plant and stick it on my trellis? You know what I mean? Like that way I know like, hey, I've got to trellis it, it's cool, I got this, like no issues. Around the garden, we got a lot of things growing. And the one thing I'll say too is like disease resistance is another thing that I'd be very cautious about. I just don't have that experience with it. You can see here, we have our squashes and they are just about toast. Believe it or not though, not too much on the vine borer damage, but just in general, they're just kind of like finishing out completely. I've grown things, and I'm gonna be growing things again because I wanna keep trying this, some disease resistance type stuff. If you remember correctly, we're gonna be doing our heirloom versus hybrid for our Brussels sprouts in this bed, which we'll be planting our Brussels sprouts soon. But even though I got hybrid seeds, I didn't necessarily get them for their disease resistance. I got them based on the speed in which they will develop and be harvestable. And that's going to be a really important thing moving forward for me, because every time I've gotten something that's disease resistant for something like powdery mildew, some kind of really common disease, vine borers, a lot of these are for squashes because that's what I've really dealt with. as far as like trying to find resistance to, you know, those common diseases and pests even that you can find resistance to. I find that it doesn't really work. And then the ones that you get some like off the wall disease or something that you hear about that you've never really seen. So you buy it thinking, well, like, and I know I've said this in the video about the Brussels sprouts, is, well, if I get it, I don't worry about it. So therefore it has to be resistant to that because, hey, I didn't get it, right? Even though I never once had the disease. So if you guys have had any kind of experience with this, or technically disappointments is really what I'm looking for, but even success stories, let us know in the comments, because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing what's advertised is really happening. But what I am trying to say is, I'm not saying that the people selling the seeds are wrong necessarily, like they're trying to get one over on you. But what I'm trying to say is, I think the people breeding the seeds may be kind of embellishing their data a little bit. And I could be totally wrong. I have no idea. Let's face it. I'm not breeding seeds like that. I don't know. All I know is that I'm not getting the results that I see. And my lima beans, I'm basically screwed right now out of my lima bean harvest, because I can't let it sit there and take over a whole bed and just be a big knot of, you know, a bird's nest of plants. That's not really going to work. I'm going to have disease, pests, nothing can grow. It's going to be a terrible situation. And don't forget, we don't even really like lima beans that much. We just wanted to get a couple. So what's the point in dealing with all that when you can't even have anything in that bed? Goodbye.